Hello, my name is Luis Vasquez, and my issue is how can sociology and travel based development with Sierra Vista revitalize its population? The question is interdisciplinary because rural communities dying out happens to be a global problem. Where I live, sometimes I see wild hogs and there are cows literally 3 houses away on farmland. It's a rural city, and like many other rural towns before it, it is essentially dying. It is number 4 on the top 10 list of shrinking places within the United States, getting smaller every year. Sociology says that social innovation has to happen in order for political innovation and town development to occur. In particular, this is known as the social motivational innovation theory, which has been supported by an organization called TEPSI. They would likely suggest that a rural population that attempts to keep its attributes the same has stagnated. And this is bad because things need to advance in order to develop. And sociology is all about people, interactions, and change. Sierra Vista is also a retirement community, though. So generally, older people move in, and the younger people, like myself, tend to move out. There's a guy named Devayota Deka. He had a friend named Dafe, and together they used Tepsi and several other works to support that young people simply like urban theories more thanks to the lifestyle instead of using cars for some reason. But they found something out that they were not expecting to, like the fact that older people and younger people actually move to relatively the same places when they move from rural areas to urban areas. Nearly the same rate, too. They used the American Community Survey, or Public US Census data, as it is more commonly known, and they had data on over 100,000 people, but the differences were only about 5%. That's pretty small. And the Center for Transit-Oriented Development, they suggested that us newer generations will move to urban locations because we want sustainable models of travel. And interestingly, high-speed trains in cities with trains transporting people report having fewer emissions because when you have 100 people driving in cars versus 100 people on a train, obviously that's going to work out better for the people who have trains. So that should support my train theory, although indirectly. Something else that Deca found was oddly, people immigrating within the United States from one city to another is actually decreasing. But for some reason, the rural communities, people leaving them, that continues to be relatively steady. And that shows that both the sociology and the transportation people recognize rural issues and their communities surviving is an issue, but neither have been able to really figure out why. Again, that's sort of why it's an interdisciplinary thing, because not one person can figure it out. It takes more than two. Yay! So there's a bunch of Asian and Japanese models that represent why trains could be a good thing. Onitsuka, Ninomiya, and Hoshino, 3 people studied how 3D models of a place seen from above with drones. They used drones and a series of surveys. They wanted to find out whether someone from outside the community could contribute useful information to the people within the community as to how they could make it better for people who wanted to go there or increase tourism, stuff like that. It's kind of common sense, but they still did this study and they have a lot of results. They wanted to find out whether it would be useless or whether it would be useful. And the third hypothesis was that diverse information would be good because you get in someone else's opinion, you get something that you don't see. Basic principle. They somewhat proved all 3 hypotheses because they found that people outside of a community did not know what government buildings or private buildings were. So they would make suggestions on moving those or altering those when high funded materials cannot be easily changed, or someone who owns that private property would have to be directly contacted, and they might not take too kindly to that. But overall, they found that you could filter out information, find useful opinions and ideas. The only real problem they had with it was that 3D models are lower quality than still images, and the people being surveyed preferred the higher quality still images. That can be fixed with technology because as we go on, chips are getting smaller, we're getting more data, everything's getting faster and better. And technological advancements are also a form of literal innovation, which, again, is led by social innovations. In terms of travel, Japan and China have a lot of trains and a lot of train programs. Three French guys, Jean-Francois Aurélien and Del Ayune, created a case study about sustainable transports in China. Their focus or point was transit-oriented development. They believed that if people could get to work and various areas of daily routine by riding a train, then their quality of life would go up, they would get happier, and they might be more likely to stay somewhere. They were studying an urban area, but it still has results that suggest building a train is a good idea because it increases accessibility to resources and allows people to go places. There's also a guy in Switzerland, Tim Peterson. He specifically looks at rural trains versus urbanized trains. So that one's directly relevant. He discovered that long distance trains, the cost can be mitigated when you use a pulse system. And he cites a guy named Vucic. He studied German and Netherlands system as well to reinforce his conclusions because they all use pulse systems with timetables of 15 or 30-minute or 60-minute intervals. Bringing that back around, going to sociology again. There was a study by Z and David McCowell about crime and the effects of direct and indirect moving. They discovered that people tend to move when they're victims of crime. No surprises there. But this links because Sierra Vista is known to have one of the lowest crime rates. It's also known to have one of the highest diversity rates because only 57% of its population is white. And it's a border town, so of course it's affected by border drama and the immigration laws. For 14 years, from 1990 to 2004, crime and immigration research was conducted, and it suggests an inverse trend, coincidentally. Not sure if that counts as evidence, but they did find that it looks like when immigration was higher, crime was lower. Just throwing that out there. And now I'm going to vent about something that seemingly nobody has studied, but it's all over the news if you look hard enough. Trump's immigration crackdown is damaging rural economies. And guess what? Sierra Vista is a rural economy. If you just look up immigration crackdown and farmers, you find pretty quick about California and those farms and how they're being damaged and losing a bunch of people in the workforce. Which, ironically, I did only think about because of a comment from Carlos Mencia about us Beaners replacing the African Americans in the workforce there. Which, it looks like it's mostly true because not even like statewide, nationwide, there are problems with agriculture and other areas where immigrants generally work in high amounts. The one study right on the nose about this, but wasn't quite what I wanted, was a study conducted by two principals. They made a study with data in about 2014 and 2015. Their study was about the 1070 SB laws, a state-specific law that was cracking down on immigration. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a law that requires, or required rather, it's no longer in effect. It was repealed, thank God. It requires all people who could be suspected of being Hispanic descent for reasonable reasons to carry their IDs, and people without an ID can be fined, could have been fined a minimum of $100, and more drastic terms of offenses could eventually lead to jail time. And I don't know about you guys, but I forgot my wallet like over a dozen times. So if this law were in effect right now, like it was in 2010, I'd basically be a felon right now. And that would be bad. It doesn't take a genius to say that's unwelcoming and pretty messed up. But again, for some reason, nobody studied how many people actually left the state because of that. In 2017, there was a day without immigrants shut down nationwide, relatively, across McDonald's. And that was the result of them protesting Trump. Though, I probably won't know how damaging his laws are, the ones actually in effect right now, until it's too late, like the other ones. The best parallel to those directives is, again, 1070 SB, which several people protested, and the Arizona Republic, as well as the mayor of Phoenix, has been quoted to say that they would have lost at least $90 million as a result of their public image damage. Because it sounds like a racist law. I mean, some of the things in effect now might not be as bad as 1070 SB was, but it's still along the same lines. And similarly, there's an article, Banderas News, about 2008, about how another Arizona law, similar to 1070 SB, scared people, and as many as 15 out of 100 people called Mr. Rogero and said they were getting up and leaving, which should suggest that hypothetically, maybe, just maybe, part of the reason people have been leaving Arizona or Sierra Vista could be because of immigration laws cracking down, which Trump is currently trying to do. And hopefully you guys see that connection. Apologies for my rants. Conclusions. Europe, Germany, Switzerland, China, and Japan have all utilized trains with success in developing their countries and economies. Though their methodologies are different, their existences should prove that trains are a positive force for developing a city and growing an economy. Particularly, I believe that the pulse system could be used, and if Amtrak would just expand existing train lines from Scottsdale or Phoenix, other places where there is higher activity of things, then people could go there and do those things and come back instead of leaving. Within the past 10 years, there have been policy shifts, so my rants about the other things may technically be irrelevant, but they're still applicable because of the clamping down on immigration. And side note, Japan, a country that is known to not be as welcoming to outsiders as they should be, or could be, no offense to them, quoted from the Washington Post, vaguely, paraphrased. Those guys, they're actually implementing laws where people can become Japanese citizens as early as a year's time if they have high enough qualifications. And if a country that's known for being relatively abrasive to outsiders is now introducing policies to raise immigration in accordance to decrease their population problems, it's the whole country, just saying, maybe a city, or we should consider the same positive effects for areas that are having issues with decreasing population. In short, my suggestions and conclusions are that existing train systems could be expanded, and it would help Sierra Vista to be included within those train lines. And we have to make sure that policies are looked at to be more friendly before they're put into effect. Something outside of control, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Okay,